Peppa Pig has been airing since 2004, and over the course of more than 2 decades, the show has become part of the lives of millions of people around the world. But do you have any idea how Peppa's world came to be, or what year the story of the Pink Pig and her family takes place? To find out everything there is to know about Peppa's timeline and history, stay until the end of this video. So join the wave, because another Cinewave is starting now. Most people have no idea, but Peppa's world has existed for millions of years. At least that's what we can infer when we watch the episode Granny from the Stone Age. In it, we see Grandpa telling Peppa and George why their grandma and her friends are pretending to be prehistoric people. And as the name of the episode suggests, we are taken to ancient times when humanity still lived in caves and hunted mammoths for food. This part of the story takes place roughly 60,000 years ago, when humans, not pigs, inhabited the caves. However, if we take it literally, the Stone Age lasted about 2.7 million years. But we could say Peppa's world has been around for even longer, since we see George finding a dinosaur bone while helping his grandpa dig, a bone that would be millions of years old. That's because many scientists claim dinosaurs became extinct around 66 million years ago, and it seems the characters in Peppa's world are fully aware of these facts, as Granny Pig and her friends go out of their way to reenact what life was like in this distant past, with Peppa and George joining in the fun. After the Stone Age, Peppa's world seems to follow a timeline quite similar to ours. We can notice this in the episode Roman Day, which once again brings the most historical moments of the show connected to Granny Pig and her senior friends. Only this time, we see them dressed in typical Roman Empire clothing, like legionaries and members of the Roman Senate. If we look at history books, we'll see that this period started before Christ and ended nearly 500 years after Christ. It shows that in the past, there really were emperors and centurions wearing helmets, just like Peppa and George do. Just like the fall of the Roman Empire marked the start of the Middle Ages for us, the same seems to have happened in Peppa's world. This becomes clear when we see several Viking references in Peppa's show. For example, in the same episode where George finds the dinosaur bone, we also see Grandpa Pig discovering a gold coin. If we take a close look at it, we'll notice that the coin has a Viking symbol engraved on it. This is a reference to the Viking invasions of England, which happened during the Middle Ages, over 1,000 years ago. Additionally, we once again see Granny Pig and her history-loving friends reenacting what it would be like to be Vikings. But instead of invading England, they're just looking for something to eat. After the Middle Ages, with its knights and Vikings, we see that Peppa's world also entered the modern age. We can spot this in a small detail from an episode where Peppa's class goes on a field trip to the Science Museum. At one point, Edmund Elephant flies a rocket made by Grandpa Rabbit. If we watch this scene closely, we can see that one of the paintings the little elephant passes by in his rocket shows Mr. Gazelle dressed as a soldier from the time of the French Revolution. He's kind of like a Napoleon Gazelle, we could say. This is also the first time we see a non-human character depicted as a historical figure in Peppa's world. It's likely that this Mr. Gazelle is the same one in the painting at Madame Gazelle's house, which we'll talk about soon. But beyond this image of Mr. Gazelle dressed as a soldier, we find other clues that give us a better idea of Peppa's world's timeline. If you also enjoy Peppa's show and its details, leave a comment below with #Pig. For instance, in another episode of the show, we can see a large monument in front of a grand building, and at the top of a tall column, there's a statue of a man wearing old military clothing. The most interesting part is that this monument actually exists in real life and is located in England. It's called Nelson's Column, a historic statue dating back to the year 1843. It commemorates Admiral Nelson of the British Royal Navy, who died in 1805, though he was born in 1758. This shows that Peppa Pig's timeline follows a sequence of events that occurred over 200 years ago. But this isn't the only piece of evidence to support this. When the Pig family visits the United States, Peppa looks through a viewpoint and sees the Great Statue of Liberty. The iconic symbol of the USA, created in 1876, is almost 150 years old and also has a human face. I honestly thought that by the time Peppa visited, we'd see a rabbit or pig version of the Statue of Liberty. But, oh well. Following Peppa's storyline, we have the presence of the Queen of England in the episode The Queen. At the time, Queen Elizabeth was still alive, and the reference to the monarch is clear. Considering this, we know that Queen Elizabeth was born in 1926. So if she's shown ruling in this episode, it's a fact that she was born nearly 100 years ago. And let's not forget, Peppa herself once dreamed of becoming queen and eating all the chocolate cake she wanted. Another detail that takes us back to this time period is seen when the Pig family visits Madame Gazelle's house, where we notice a picture on her wall of a man who's likely Mr. Gazelle, her late husband. The truth is, the photo isn't dated, but judging by Mr. Gazelle's clothes, we can guess the photo was taken in the 1920s, around the time Queen Elizabeth was born. This makes perfect sense since the same character appears in the painting at the museum during Edmund Elephant's rocket scene, indicating that the character lived a very long life. It would all fit if he were a vampire, just like Madame Gazelle. In fact, we've covered this story on our channel, where we prove that Peppa's teacher is indeed a vampire from Transylvania. If you're curious, click the card above. Following Peppa's timeline, the show also mentions an event that took place about 90 years ago. We're talking about the day when Peppa and George found a bottle on the beach while out for a walk with their grandma. When they opened the bottle and read the letter inside, they found a message from someone named Reggie Rabbit. After calling the contact in the letter, we discover that Reggie Rabbit and Grandpa Rabbit are actually the same person. So Rebecca Rabbit's grandfather explains that he threw that bottle into the sea about 100 years ago. Based on Grandpa Rabbit's appearance and the fact that he could write a letter, we can deduce that he would have been about 4 or 5 years old at the time. We can also see that he exaggerated a bit when he said he threw the bottle 100 years ago, which, if true, would have made it almost impossible for Grandpa Rabbit to still be alive. After all, he'd be over 105 years old. So, to be a little generous with the character, we can assume he threw the letter into the sea around 90 years ago or so. That's a lot, and since time is precious, don't waste any more of it. Click the subscribe button if you're not subscribed yet. If there's anyone who is as old or even older than Rebecca Rabbit's grandpa, it's Madame Gazelle. This becomes quite clear when we watch the episode Visiting Madame Gazelle. In it, we see something that leads us to this conclusion right away: Peppa's teacher's pine tree, which is next to her house. In the story, we learn that Peppa's teacher planted the little tree many years ago when it was just a small sapling. Now we see that the tree is as tall or even taller than Madame Gazelle's house. The house is 4 stories high, which means it's approximately 12 meters tall. And according to botanical information, a pine tree takes about 40 years to reach that height. But Madame Gazelle is also present at another significant historical moment: Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig's childhood. That's because, in the episode Madame Gazelle's Leaving Party, we see a flashback where young Daddy Pig and young Mommy Pig were students of the old Gazelle. Considering that both characters are now adults with 2 kids, one 5 years old and the other 3, we can imagine that this happened about 30 years ago. This fits with the timeline of the Peppa Pig show. Now the big question is, what year does Peppa's show actually take place? There are a few theories about this. The first is that the show takes place between 2004 and 2005, the year it was first aired. However, this can't be true because in the episode Mr. Fox's Van, we see a sign on his vehicle that says he's been in the buying and selling business since 2010. This suggests that Peppa's world takes place sometime after 2010. Moreover, we know that across several seasons, there have already been 6 Christmas episodes. And since Christmas is only celebrated once a year, we can say that technically a few years have passed in the show. However, in practice this isn't the case, as none of the child characters have grown significantly so far. This makes it a mystery as to exactly what year Peppa's world is set in. We do know that Queen Elizabeth was still alive, so Peppa's world definitely takes place before 2022, the year the Queen passed away. This leads us to conclude that Peppa's stories occur sometime between 2010 and 2022. That's the complete timeline of events that happened in Peppa Pig. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and pick another video to watch with us. We have these 2 popping up on your screen that are really great. Just click on the one you want to watch first.